Okay, let's unpack this. We are starting today with an acronym that, let's be honest, it looks exactly like a swear word.
Oh, absolutely.
You see MTHFR on a lab result or a health blog, and your brain just automatically fills in the vowels, doesn't it?
It is the most unfortunate branding problem in modern genetics, I think.
No.
It looks like the universe is shouting an expletive at you.
Right.
But despite the, aggressive abbreviation, MTHFR is actually one of the most elegant and critical components of our biology.
Which is exactly why we're doing this deep dive. We're going to move past the license plate humor because the sources we have today are they're intense. We're looking at comprehensive reviews, a lot of genetic research up to 2026, and some really heavy clinical data. We're talking about what the literature calls the metabolic gatekeeper.
And that is really the best way to frame it. MTHFR stands for methylene tetrahydrofolate reductase.
It's a mouthful.
It is a mouthful, but if you strip away all that jargon, this isn't just a gene. It's a biological switch. It sits at a major intersection in your body and essentially decides whether your DNA gets repaired or, well, whether your blood becomes toxic.
And that's the mission for this discussion. We're going to decode this gatekeeper. I want to understand the mechanics, the code itself, the typos in our DNA.
And nuts and bolts.
And you're going to help us understand why that matters for someone who just wants to know why they're tired, maybe anxious, or even having trouble conceiving.
Exactly. We need to bridge that gap between the microscopic chemistry on, chromosome 1 and the macroscopic reality of your daily life. Because having a variant is one thing, but knowing what to do about it, that's where the real power is.
So let's dive into the biochemistry, but, keep it painless. This gene lives on chromosome 1, specifically position 1p36.3. What is its actual day job?
Its job is to run a very, very specific chemical conversion. It takes a molecule called 5,000 methylene tetrahydrofolate.
Okay, that sounds like alphabet soup already. Let's translate that.
Right. Think of the MTHFR enzyme as a traffic cop,
Okay.
and it's standing at this crucial intersection inside your cells. And this cop has to decide where to send the raw materials. There are two main roads leaving this intersection. Path A is nucleotide synthesis.
That's the construction crew, right? Building things.
Right. That path is for making new DNA and repairing the old stuff. It's vital for growth, for keeping your genetic code intact.
And Path B?
Path B is remethylation. This is the cleanup crew. Their job is to take a toxic chemical called homocysteine and recycle it into a helpful one called methionine.
So the enzyme determines if we're building new DNA or if we're cleaning up toxins.
Precisely. And here's the catch. This conversion is irreversible. It's a one-way street. Once the MTHFR enzyme commits to making 5-MTHF for that cleanup crew, there's no turning back. So this traffic cop has to be incredibly precise.
And what happens when the cop, falls asleep on the job or is just bad at?
You get a bottleneck, a traffic jam. And the consequences are twofold. First, you get what's called global DNA hypomethylation.
That sounds bad.
It's bad for gene regulation. Your genes don't get the tags they need to turn on or off. But immediately, and more dangerously for some, you get an accumulation of homocysteine.
And the sources are very clear that homocysteine is nasty stuff.
It's like sand in the gears of your vascular system. If it lingers, it causes oxidative stress, vascular injury, even neurological damage.
We'll definitely get to the specific damage in a second, especially for the heart and brain. But let's look at the structure of this enzyme first. The research calls it a flavoprotein. What does that actually mean?
It just means the enzyme is needy. It can't work alone. It needs a sidekick. Specifically, it needs FAD, which is just the fancy scientific name for the active form of vitamin B2.
Riboflavin.
Riboflavin. So B2 is essentially the fuel for the traffic cop.
Or what is it?
It's more like the structural scaffolding. The enzyme has a catalytic domain that does the work and a regulatory domain that's like an on-off switch. And riboflavin sits right in the middle. It physically holds these two parts together.
So if you don't have enough B2,
the enzyme literally becomes unstable and can start to fall apart.
Okay, so we have the machine, and we know it needs B2. Now let's talk about when the machine itself is built differently. These are the typos in the code.
Right, and these aren't rare diseases. We're talking about variations found in up to, 40% of certain populations?
Wow.
And there are two main ones you need to know, C677T and A1298C.
Let's start with C677T. This seems to be the big one in all the literature. What is physically happening in the DNA?
It's a single letter swap. At position 6777 in the gene, a cytosine gets swapped for a thymine. That's it.
It's just one letter.
One letter. But that change causes an amino acid called alanine to be replaced by valine. And this creates a very specific problem, thermolability.
Thermolability. That means heat sensitivity, right?
Yeah.
But can you make that, like, visceral for us? What does that look like?
It literally means the enzyme becomes sensitive to heat. So in individuals who are homozygous for this variant,
Meaning they have two copies, the TT genotype.
right, the TT, their enzyme is physically unstable at normal body temperature. If you have a fever or even just run a little hot, the enzyme starts to lose its 3D shape.
It melts.
It effectively melts or unravels. Yes.
That is wild. So if you have the 677TT genotype, your enzyme is basically falling apart on the job just because you're warm?
Yeah, in a manner of speaking, yeah. And the math is just brutal. If you have the TT genotype, you're operating at only about 30% of normal enzymatic activity.
30%.
Imagine trying to bail out a flooding boat with a bucket that is 70% smaller than everyone else's.
That is a massive handicap. What about the heterozygous folks, the ones with just one copy?
They sit at about 65% activity, so they have a smaller bucket, but it's not as, as critical as the TT group.
Okay, so 30% capacity for the TT group. Now, what about the other variant, A1298C?
That one's a bit different. It's in the regulatory domain, the back end of the protein. It isn't heat sensitive, so it doesn't melt, but it just works slower. If you have two copies out, the CC, you're at about 61% activity.
So still a reduction, but not as dramatic.
Generally considered less severe, yes.
But here's the kicker. You can have both. The sources call this compound heterozygosity, one of each.
The double whammy.
Yeah.
And when you combine them, you end up with about 55% activity. But clinically, this often presents just as severely as the 677TT type.
Why is that?
Because you're getting hit from two different angles: catalytic instability from the 677 side and regulatory slowness from the 1298 side.
So before we get into the diseases, I have to ask the evolutionary question. If this 677TT variant makes the enzyme work at 30% capacity, which sounds like a terrible survival strategy, why didn't natural selection weed it out?
That is the paradox. And the leading theory is fascinating. Remember those two roads, DNA synthesis versus methylation?
Yeah, the construction crew and the cleanup crew.
Well, if the enzyme is lazy and won't send traffic down the cleanup road, the body is forced to send more resources down the construction road, DNA synthesis.
So it might have protected against DNA breakage.
Exactly. There's some good evidence it offers protection against things like colorectal cancer in specific high folate environments. By not doing the methylation step as well, the body focuses entirely on keeping the genetic code intact.
So it's not a defect so much as a trade-off.
It's a trade-off that just happens to be very inconvenient in the modern world.
Right. And that trade-off seems to be causing a lot of problems. Let's shift to the clinical implications. The sources mention H-type hypertension.
This is a huge concept. Most people think high blood pressure is just about salt or stress or bad luck.
Right.
But H-type hypertension is high blood pressure, specifically driven by high homocysteine levels.
And the mechanism there isn't just about fluid, it's actual damage.
Oh, yeah. Homocysteine is toxic to the endothelium, the lining of your blood vessels. It causes oxidative stress, but more importantly, it reduces your nitric oxide.
And nitric oxide is what tells your blood vessels to relax.
It's the relaxant. So if MTHFR is slow, homocysteine builds up, nitric oxide goes down, vessels stay tight, and pressure goes up.
And this is where that riboflavin connection we mentioned earlier becomes the star of the show.
It really does. In people with the 677TT genotype, the ones with the melting enzyme, having low riboflavin creates a crisis.
Because it's the glue.
It's the glue holding the enzyme together. And studies show that in these TT individuals, low B2 can triple the risk of hypertension.
Triple! That's incredible.
Triple. But here's the good news. If you give a TT individual simple, low-dose riboflavin, maybe 1.6 milligram, you can sometimes see a dramatic drop in blood pressure.
Because you're fixing the machine.
You are physically stabilizing the enzyme so it can do its job. It's a mechanical fix.
That is huge. Okay, let's move up to the brain. Mental health. The sources link MTHFR to depression, schizophrenia, ADHD. How does a methylation gene affect my mood?
It's all about the manufacturing line. To make neurotransmitters, the chemicals that run your brain like serotonin, dopamine, you need a molecule called SAM.
And let me guess, you need MTHFR to make SAM.
You certainly do. If MTHFR is bottlenecked, you can't produce enough SAM. If you can't produce SAM, you can't produce serotonin. It's that simple. The 677TT genotype is linked to earlier onset of depression and more severe episodes.
Because the brain is literally struggling to manufacture the molecules of happiness.
Exactly. It's a resource problem.
The data on schizophrenia was particularly startling to me.
It is profound. In some schizophrenia patients, MTHFR activity can drop down to around 18-21%.
Wow.
And this correlates directly with the negative symptoms,
Holy crap.
cognitive deficits. The brain is just starving for the methyl groups it needs to function.
And the other variant, A1298C, has a specific link to ADHD, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. While 677 affects the whole system, A1298C seems to have a specific impact on dopamine synthesis in the brain. Studies show a 7.4-fold increased risk of inattentive type ADHD with this variant.
So if you have a child who dreamy,
It's
unfocused.
a pathway that's definitely worth checking. It can be a revelation.
Okay, heart, brain. Now, reproductive health. This is usually how people find out they have the gene, right? When they're trying to conceive.
Unfortunately, yes. The classic association is neural tube defects, like spina bifida.
Yeah.
That's why we fortify grains with folic acid.
Right.
The 677T genotype doubles that risk. But recently, we're looking more at fertility and recurrent pregnancy loss.
The sources mention microclots. That sounds terrifying.
It is a mechanism we really need to understand. High homocysteine is prothrombotic.
It makes you clot more easily.
Exactly. And in the tiny microscopic vessels of a developing placenta, those microclots can cut off the nutrient supply to the embryo.
Causing miscarriage.
Yes, or implantation failure in IVF. The embryo is healthy, the uterus is healthy, but the supply line gets clogged.
And that's why fertility specialists are moving towards active folate.
Many are, yes. They're shifting from standard folic acid to active 5-MTHF to lower that homocysteine quickly and effectively.
This brings us directly to the biggest fight in this field, the great debate. Folic acid versus methylfolate. To the average person, they sound like the same thing.
It's not identical.
So why is this such a battleground?
Because chemically, they are worlds apart. And this is crucial for you to grasp. Folic acid is synthetic. It is an oxidized molecule that does not exist in nature. To use it, your body has to run it through a gauntlet of enzymes, starting with one called DHFR.
And the sources say DHFR is not great.
It's painfully slow,
Yeah.
and it's easily saturated. So if you take a high dose of synthetic folic acid, say, in a standard prenatal vitamin, and your DHFR is slow, and your MTHFR is broken,
Yeah, you get a traffic jam.
a huge pileup, which leads to something called UMFA.
Unmetabolized folic acid.
Yes, it's basically raw, unprocessed synthetic vitamin floating around in your blood.
Is that dangerous or just wasteful?
The emerging evidence suggests it's not benign. We call it UMFA syndrome. It can cause immune dysfunction by lowering your natural killer cells.
Your first responders.
Exactly. It can also mask a B12 deficiency, and there's even evidence it might mess with cognitive function in the elderly. It's essentially pollution in your bloodstream,
But then you have the alternative, 5-MTHF or methylfolate.
which is the active form. It's pre-digested. It bypasses the MTHFR traffic cop entirely.
So it doesn't matter how efficient your enzyme is?
It doesn't matter if your enzyme is 30% efficient or 100%. Methylfolate walks right through the door and gets to work immediately.
So I have to play devil's advocate here. If methylfolate is so clearly the superior active form that bypasses the defect, why is there a standoff? Why do the CDC and ACOG explicitly advise against routine MTHFR testing and insist everyone take synthetic folic acid?
We have to report this impartially because both sides have valid points based on their goals. The CDC's mandate is it is the only form proven in massive, multi-decade population studies to prevent spina bifida. It's shelf-stable, it's cheap. They worry that if they switch the recommendation, birth defect rates will rise. They're playing the numbers game.
Okay, and the other side, the functional medicine view.
Their argument is personalized medicine.
Right.
They argue that a one-size-fits-all approach ignores the biology of the 40% of people with variants.
Right.
They argue, why pump a TT homozygote full of synthetic acid that causes UMFA when you could just give them the active form they actually need?
It really is a clash between save the most people with the cheapest tool versus optimize the individual based on their code.
That is exactly what it is. And as a listener, you have to decide which game you are playing. Are you a population statistic or are you an individual patient?
Okay, let's pivot to solutions. Nutritional optimization. If I'm listening to this and I suspect I'm a TT, what do? The sources say genes load the gun, but environment pulls the trigger. How do we keep the safety on?
The protocol is actually quite elegant. It starts with our star player, riboflavin, B2.
Back to B2.
I cannot stress this enough. If you are a 677T individual, you need B2 to physically stabilize that wobbly melting enzyme. The studies show doses as low as 1.6 milligrams can have a massive effect.
That's so actionable. Check your B2. Who else is in the supporting cast?
Methyl B12. You have to take folate and B12 together. They're dance partners. If you just take folate, you can mask a B12 deficiency or get stuck in something called the folate trap.
And choline. I found this part fascinating, the idea of a back door.
This is my favorite biohack for MTHFR. If the MTHFR front door is locked because of your genetics, your body has a backup plan. You can use choline to recycle homocysteine through a completely different pathway.
So eating eggs and liver, which are rich in choline, is basically bypassing the traffic jam.
Exactly. It takes the pressure off the MTHFR gene. If you have the variant, you should arguably be eating more eggs than the average person. You're giving your body an alternate route to detoxify.
And finally, we have to stop poisoning the system. What are the big methyl depleters?
Alcohol is number one. It just drains your methyl resources. Heavy metals like mercury do the same. If your methylation bucket is already leaky because of your genes, you can't afford to pour toxins into it.
So to recap the protocol, eat your leafy greens for natural folate, get your choline from eggs to open the back door, watch the booze, and maybe check your B2 levels to stabilize the enzyme.
It sounds simple, but for someone with that stubborn hypertension or treatment-resistant depression, this could be the missing link.
So what does this all mean? We've gone from a swear word acronym to a traffic cop to this huge debate about synthetic vitamins.
It means that MTHFR is a vital switch for your DNA and your mental health. But a variant is not a sentence. It's just information. It tells you that your body has a specific maintenance manual.
And looking forward, the sources mention that by 2026, we are moving into the era of systems biology.
Right. We're moving past looking at just one gene in isolation. We're looking at the whole landscape, how MTHFR interacts with COMT, how it interacts with your gut. But the core lesson remains. Your genetics are not your destiny. They are your baseline.
I love that. Your genetics are your baseline.
And here's a thought to leave you with.
Mm.
We know, statistically know, that roughly 40% of the population processes nutrients differently because of this one gene.
Right.
Knowing that, does it really make sense to fortify our entire food supply with a synthetic vitamin that nearly half the population struggles to process efficiently?
That is the big question. It forces you to consider how your own unique makeup interacts with the world around you. We hope this deep dive helped you unlock a little bit of your own code. Thanks for listening.
Stay curious.